Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you're a TikToker and you do really, really cool TikToks that people seem to love, and also an anxiety coach, which obviously anxiety is such a hot topic issue right now. But what made you want to specialize in anxiety?
I was really anxious as a kid. So growing up, I felt like I felt really worried. I always thought something bad was going to happen. And then I also felt really alone and I worried that people were annoyed with me or that I was different. And it was so helpful for me when anybody would say, me too, or I felt like I could share. And I always wanted to work with kids at first, just so they wouldn't feel weird and alone or worried. And I could help them like have their shoulders drop and like have that little bit of sense of peace of like, oh wait, maybe other people feel the way I do and I'm not alone. So that was what helped me, because my other job is as a school psychologist.
Okay.
So I really wanted to work in psychology and then with kids.
Oh,
But now
cool.
I've transitioned a
Yeah,
little bit.
you always want to kind of help people, like where your life is a life purpose.
I did. When I was deciding, it was between I wanted to do maybe something with animals, like animal rescue. I was very passionate about that. And I actually felt like maybe it would be too upsetting to work. And another thing I was thinking was in terms of like social work or kids that had like really bad things happen to them. And then I thought that might be actually really hard for me to handle if it was children that were abused or animals. So I wanted to help, but I also knew I'm really sensitive.
Yeah, totally. And then when did you start posting on TikTok?
My first post was actually just August 27th,
Oh, really? That's so cool.
and it wasn't really a good one, but
And has it affected your life and affected your practice?
yeah, TikTok has changed my life so much. My daughter, who's 13, was the one that was like, "Go on TikTok," and then once I thought I was just going to talk, and then once I started watching videos, I was like, "Oh, I could do an anxiety one on this." And it has honestly, not only do all my clients now come from TikTok, but I get thousands of messages every day of people telling me that I'm changing their life or saving their life. And so I've never been as fulfilled
Yeah,
as making TikTok videos, which is crazy. But so it's 100% changed my life for the better. TikTok is my best thing in 2020.
yeah, totally. I think for a lot of people. Um, and on your TikToks a lot, you talk a lot about panic attacks, which is really cool. I mean, I always talk about how I have panic attacks and stuff, but they seem very stigmatized to talk about it. So, what do you think is the best way to destigmatize them?
Um, I think it could be helpful in talking about how we all have the start of a panic attack, sometimes every day, where if your phone rings and you were like,
Yeah,
you weren't expecting it, or there was a knock on the door, or when you're in one room and something falls in the other, you're like, oh, you get startled. So, but then, say for example, you're lying in your bed and you hear a crash. And at first your heart starts beating and you get a little bit tense and depending on your age or who you live with, you're like, my gosh, should I get my mom and dad or should I get somebody to walk in their room or what is it? And then you might notice, oh, my cat knocked over this vase. And then you still might be shaky, but you see what it is. So for a panic attack, that's often where it is we have a worried thought, you know, but with panic, it often just doesn't stop there because that first one is you scan your environment, which, you do if you hear a noise, you're like, oh, wait, oh, it was my cat. They knocked over the vase. You can kind of subside. But if there's not danger in your environment, then you go to your body and you're like, am I feeling off here? So that's that fight or flight, the stages of it. And with anxiety, you're like, oh, yeah, I am. My heart is beating. Or what if I'm going to go crazy? Or like, is this a heart attack this time? And it can be really hard because I went off on a tangent on that. My point is, I think to just have people understand
yeah,
and to destigmatize it. This guy, Josh Fletcher, who's on Instagram as Anxiety Josh, he was like, we need to change the name of panic attacks to adrenaline flood.
yeah,
Um, And I think just destigmatizing it, the more people are talking about it. I know another woman on Instagram did like a music video and showed herself having a panic attack. Um, so I think social media is such a great way to see that normal people, it's not like, oh, this person is some weirdo that has a panic attack, where just more understanding
Yeah,
and more understanding about panic attacks and how to support people. Um,
yeah,
does that answer your question?
yeah, for sure,
Okay.
definitely. And then there are a lot of people who have anxiety or have panic attacks, and it's kind of like maybe they want to get help, they want to see a therapist, but they don't know how. Either they don't want to tell their parents, or they don't have the financial means, or they're just kind of ashamed and like see, because you kind of have that thing where secretly inside you do want to talk to somebody, but then you don't actually want to go through with it and see someone. So what advice would you give to somebody who's kind of in that stage where it's like, I want help, but I don't, and I don't know how to get it?
I think figuring out who might be the right person to talk to. So for some people, yeah, it is, unfortunately, their parents
Yeah.
might be not the people to go to, because sometimes parents have a different idea of therapy or mental health, or and so I do think it's like, my recommendation would always be to go to somebody that they can trust, and maybe even if they saw somebody that they liked on social media that was trusted, like a therapist or a coach, and could even reach out to them and ask them some questions, or if they had a friend that they knew. Like, I guess my point is, talk to trusted people, because you wouldn't want to talk to a friend and they're like, never go to therapy, I had the worst therapist. Like, if you have a friend that has been in therapy, um, or maybe if you're in school and you have a counselor or a school psychologist, that's a great place to start. So if it's a student that's listening, could be asking your teacher, asking your principal to hook you up with the school counselor or the school psychologist. Then if you have a friend who's seen a therapist, it might be good to say, can you tell me about that? Like, what's it like? Or if there is a therapist out there, to say, what is it like working with you? And so to understand, um, another good thing, there's so many wonderful podcasts out there that talk about, whether it's OCD or anxiety or panic. And I would just make sure to get that you're listening to something that makes you feel good and hopeful, because people can really get to a good feeling place even if they've had anxiety and panic attacks and OCD and everything. So to make sure you're listening or reading something from somebody that is hopeful and positive about the recovery.
Yeah, totally. And then obviously, a lot of people are talking about mental health now, which is so important that there is awareness for it. But on the other side, a lot of people seem to be almost kind of upset about the conversation because they think it's like romanticizing mental illness, or making it something glorified or that people want to have. And with anxiety, I think a lot of people get kind of worked up about the subject because obviously everybody kind of has anxiety to some degree, but what would you say is the difference between like just normal anxiety, that it's like, okay, like yes, you do get anxious but it's not a problem, and someone where it's really like a disorder?
hmm Well, so yeah, everybody gets stressed. If you're going to have a test, and some of that is helpful. If you have a test, you might be like, I'm going to study. And so you stay up late studying, um, or if you're meeting someone new for the first time, you might have butterflies in your stomach, and that's normal. And that could be that anticipation, anxiety, and stress. And then it goes down. Um, and so for people, yes, they're anxious, but if it goes down and it's not negatively impacting their life. So if someone's anxiety starts to impact their day-to-day functioning, where their anxiety is so bad that they also have physical symptoms, and then their stomach hurts, or they're having a lot of headaches, and it's stopping them from going to school or going to work, or they're there and they're really not able to focus because they're so focused and obsessed about their anxiety or their physical symptoms. So I think it would be really the impact that it's having, because I know people that It impacts their sleep really badly. They're not able to work. They have a hard time going to school. They're not able to, engage with their friends. If it starts changing their eating habits too, because sometimes people get so anxious that it's hard for them to eat.
Yeah.
Um, or it depends on, yeah, like how much time is it taking up if they're constantly obsessing about their health or about something else that's making them anxious. That's when I think it would be good to get help and not to stay like stuck in suffering, because it's really, there's so many great options for health and for feeling better, so people can just have a better understanding of anxiety, because I really do feel like anxiety is something to be understood and not feared, and it really is possible to get to a better feeling place.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for people who kind of feel like anxiety is controlling their life? Like just baby steps to get out of that cycle?
The one is, well, I'll give you a few. To recognize what's your anxious mind, like what's that anxious thought. Sometimes it's just habitual, like, old news stuff, and to recognize, wait, like I don't have to take my thoughts so seriously, because it's really inside out, where our thoughts create our feelings. It's not we're just not these circumstances, it's my thoughts about it. And that was huge for me to realize, wait, I don't have to take my thoughts so seriously. Like my thoughts could be wrong. The thought of I'm going to be a failure, or nobody likes me, or what if I'm having a heart attack? Like those are going to make me feel bad. But to recognize, wait, that might be my anxious mind.
Yeah.
And I don't have to take it seriously. And the other one is that you don't have to do anything to have new thoughts, because our thoughts are ever changing, which sometimes is annoying, because you might think, "Ooh, I need to text my dad back. And what am I going to get my sister for Christmas?" And those thoughts come, they stay as long as they're going to stay, and then they go without us having to do anything. And the same is true for our anxious thoughts. When we don't take them so seriously, they pop up and then they go. And I know some people, we can get caught up in like, okay, I don't want to have this thought, or what does this mean about me, or figuring it out, or trying to like, I never want to think this. And it can just make the thought stickier, or to just be able to like turn down the volume on those anxious thoughts a little bit and just really trust that they'll go. Um, so that would be one of my big tips.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, and then is there anything about intrusive thoughts or anxiety that you just wish more people knew about?
I wish more people knew how common intrusive thoughts were.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
that good people can have. You can have a weird thought like, what if I drove my car off this bridge? Or so that one, it's normal. Kind people, sane people, loving people can have a weird thought.
I've
And
had those too, and they're so weird.
yeah, right. But for some people, they come and then they're like, oh, that's weird. And then it goes.
Yeah,
But for people with anxiety or OCD, it's like, oh my gosh. And often it bothers them because it's so against their nature, it's against their morals. One, it's like, well, I don't want to stab somebody with a knife, or I don't want to throw this hot coffee at them. Like, why would I think that?
right.
So it is really like that goes back to the same thing too, is we don't have to take our thoughts so seriously. And in fact, that's where it is. It's like, don't go down trying to figure out why you had that thought, trying to fix it, trying to force it. Just like that thought can come, it doesn't mean anything about you.
Hmm.
It's not really your first thought that counts, it's your second thought and like your first action. So I wish they were just talked about more, because it's so freeing and it takes the charge away. Then they come less and less. And when they do come, it's, I often have a thought driving. That was where I first had a panic attack. And so I would have this fear, because it's a big responsibility to be behind the wheel.
That was where I would get intrusive thoughts too.
Yeah. And it was like, what if I hit somebody with my car? And then I would be like, what if I hit them? And I was so nervous and I just drove off, And now, because it was such a common one, when someone's not walking on the sidewalk, if they're like in the side of the road, I just get like, I'm not get worried, but I have a thought like, what if I hit them? But now it's such a weak thought that I have no anxiety or worry about it. It comes, I don't do anything. And then I probably like change the song and I think about what I'm going to eat. So I think just destigmatizing intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, for people who are anxious or having intrusive thoughts, do you think it's important for them to just kind of find something to take their mind off it instead of focusing on it?
I think that's a great idea in theory, but
Mm.
sometimes if they force it,
Yeah.
then um, it can get stickier, because it can seem like putting too much energy onto the intrusive thought. when really the thing is like, that they don't need to try to distract themselves when they just recognize that thought doesn't mean anything about them. They don't need to try to fight it. They don't need to try to fix it or figure out why they had it. Like that can come. But that's kind of what I was talking about with then they'll have a new thought. And then by just nature, they'll do something else. So, but even if we might have an intrusive thought like at dinner or sitting down with somebody and you can't really do anything else. So that's where it's like, oh, the thought comes, you might feel a little weird. And then if you're not paying too much attention to it, you're not giving it too much airtime, you'll then hear what the person says and you'll have some new thoughts.
Yeah, for sure.
But on that note, though, somebody's wisdom could guide them. If they were watching a scary movie and they were having all these intrusive thoughts, it's totally fine to be like, I'm going to turn this movie off right now.
Yeah.
Not all the time. I mean, we wouldn't want them to get into like, well, now I never watch scary movies. But it's fine to be like, you know what? I'm not really in the right headspace for this movie. Like that's totally fine too.
Totally. And then you do coaching sessions, and you also do groups, which is really cool. What type of work do you do in those?
I have one of my, which I call my signature group. We talk all about anxiety, understanding anxiety, and me sharing the principles that have been the most helpful for me. And we talk about a lot of like health anxiety, intrusive thoughts, worrying about family members. So that's just like all maybe OCD behaviors in there. It's a pretty broad one. And I have another relationship group. So we talk about relationship anxiety. And then in my just individual sessions, that can be somebody might have social anxiety or health anxiety or intrusive thoughts or death anxiety. And so in a one-on-one session could be anxiety is my specialty, but whatever is coming up for somebody is what I'm happy to
Okay.
work with them with.
Yeah. And then where can people find you and learn more about your work?
On TikTok, I'm just at Peace From Within. And on Instagram, I'm _ Peace From Within. And my website is peace-from-within.com.